Hi, Steve here in my workshop in Bellevue for Shopsmith Mark 47520. Having already made a shaker style frame and panel construction using the stacked dado, another way that we can do that same thing is using the molding head. Now, I want you to look down here at these two frames that we've already done. This one over here we did using the stacked dado. And this one over here I've done using the molding head. Now I want you to notice some differences. First of all, notice here on the end of the one done with the stacked dado, see how long the tongue is that's fitting in here into the groove on each one? Now look over here on the one done with the molding head. See how short it is on there. So that's the first difference you're going to see. You get longer tongues on the shaker style using the stacked dado. But let's see another difference. Over here on the one with the molding head, you can see we've got some nice curved on the edges all the way around. And that's what the molding head did, which we don't have here on the shaker style. Now, even though my stock was the same identical size, in other words, the width here is 2 1/4 inches, and this width here is 2 1/4 inches. This appears to be narrower, doesn't it? Because of the molding that's been done along the edge here. So this vertical part here appears to be not as wide as what is over here. So the appearance is a little bit different here when we use the molding head. The other thing I want you to notice here is over on the stacked dado, how rigid and firm this is with no glue whatsoever, because it's a nice friction fit in there. When we do it on the molding head, we don't have that benefit. It's going to fall apart. It won't stay together by itself. We have to have glue to hold this together. Now we will glue the one that's done with the stacked dado, but it's going to be a much stronger joint than what it will be using the molder. So that's the significant differences there between the two. Now I want to talk about some terminology here. We're going to look up here on the board. And this is the terminology we use when we do it on the molder or on the shaper, either one. And so when we cut the rails, on the rails, it's called sticking the stiles. Now I'll explain why it's called that in just a minute. On the rails here, when we cut the ends on there, it's called coping the rails. It's just the terminology that's used in woodworking. We call this sticking the stiles because we're preparing this style so that the rail can stick into it. That's why that's terminology. So you may see that terminology a number of places. That's what it means, and that is what it's used for. Another difference here between using the shaker style and using the molder is the order in which we do the cutting operations. When we did the stacked dado, remember, we did this groove first, and then we cut this to match so that it would exactly fit in there. When we do it on the molding head, we do the exact opposite, and it has to do with the ease of making fine adjustments to get a good fit. So over on the molder, we cope the ends of the rails first, and then we set up our machine so that this will perfectly match, and I'll get a flush surface on there. So you'll notice that we're going to do the order just the reverse when we do on the molding head. And you see that here in the next segment, we're going to start with coping the ends of these rails. The molding head with the molding knives can be used in a matched pair to cut the rails and stiles. Knives set 29 and 30, the panel covered door and the panel door rail coper, those are matched set that can be used to cut the stiles and the rails, the ends, so that they can match each other. Here we have the molder set up on the table saw. You can see here we have the molding head, and when we do our rails and stiles, we do the ends of the rails first, which is called coping the rails. And we've got that cutter mounted here in the molding head. And to feed that, you're going to need to have something like the Tenon Master in order to hold that in position to feed it through. Now, what we also want to do is we want to have a backer board here to prevent tear out on our stock. So what I've done here is I've taken a scrap piece and I put double stick tape on it and stuck it to the Tenon Master is what I've done to keep that in place. So now this end of this one has already been coped, and this is what it looks like when it's done. The thing you want to do when you set it up is you want to make sure that the thickness of this little lip here and this lip here, you can see that, we want the thickness to be the same. So we want the thickness of this part and this part here to be equal when we get it set up correctly. And so I've done several passes with MDF. My MDF is 3/4, which is exactly the same as my stock. And so I've done several passes and I've got this set for both my height and for the position side to side. Now to do it for the height, what we want to do is we want to set it so that when our stock here is above the lip on here, that lip just barely catches the surface of here. So that's how we know when we've got our height set correctly. And when we feed that through, okay, this will get, we want to put it back here. When you push this down on the table, position it back here on the table. Don't position it over the insert because that level may not be identical to here. So we want to get it all the way down to the table here, and then we're going to clamp it in place. And then when we feed that, we want to have even pressure, so this is down flat, and then it will feed through. And you just feed it through in one pass. You're not going to pull it back. You will remove the stock. So I'm ready to cut my actual pieces now, my 2 rails. We're going to go ahead and put this in here so you can watch me do these. So here you can see we've got the ends coped on each piece. You see there's absolutely no tear out whatsoever. That's what this backer board does for that. Now I'm over here on my Mark IV with the molding head and the cutter set up to do the inside of all the rails and the stiles. We will do both all the way around with this particular cutter. Now I want you to come down here and look at my table. I want to talk a little bit about the setup for doing this, which is different than when we coped the rails. First of all, you got to notice here, we have to have a sacrificial fence here mounted next to our fence. Why? Because the cutter itself, we have to have part of the profile going up into this sacrificial fence. So you'll need to make yourself one. I like to do it on MDF. This is 3/4 inch MDF, and I've attached it here with some core-20 screws using some T-nuts to hold these in place. And of course, what you'll do is you will put the table up and you'll drop that down so that makes that cut in there is what you'll do. What I like to do when I set my cut is I have the cut go about 1/2 inch into here. This is 3/4 inch thick, so I have 1/2 inch go in there, so I've got plenty of room. The other thing on this setup you'll notice here is when we did for the coping the rails, we used the standard molding table insert, which Dottie's going to hand to me right over there. We use this table and insert when we cope the rails. Reason we did that was that the Tenon Master held that stock firmly in place, so it wasn't going to drop down into this space at all. But when we're doing the edges here, we have to have a different approach because that wide of opening, these, when we're feeding it through this here, can fall down into that opening. So you have to have a zero clearance insert when you do this one. Now, I tried it first using the Shopsmith ones, which are made out of plastic, and I was able to do a cut, but you don't get good results, and I'll tell you why. Because there's too much flex in these, so that you don't get the kind of firm support that you need to get really good, fine results. So don't use these, please. Make sure and get yourself some solid ones, either out of MDF or out of some solid stock, so that you get some good solid support. Because if you do that, you can see here that when our stock feeds past here, it's got support here and it's got support here, so the stock can't fall down through the table at all. So you need to make sure you have a good zero clearance insert. And the same thing, what you're going to do on here is you will start with the table up and you'll drop that down through and have the cutter come through. Now let's talk a little bit more about the setup on this particular cutter. When we do the setup, we're going to want to, when we end up, we're going to want to have these rails that are already coped. We want so that when it fits together, that it's exactly flush here on both sides. Okay, what's going to get that is the positioning of the fence this direction. So you'll have to fine-tune that position to get these to fit exactly. You're going to have to make a number of test cuts to fine-tune to get that the way you want it to be. Now, let's talk about the depth of cut here. We want the depth of cut so that this, let's get a close up on here right here so you can see this. Okay, so that this part of the cutter right here, we want it to just barely scrape the surface of our stock when we goes past there. And it's just barely grabbing our stock. If it's any higher than that, what's going to happen is every pass you make, it's going to take more off of this edge. You'll actually change the width of your stock if you have that set up too high. And if you make multiple passes, every pass is going to make that get thin, the width of it be less and less. So you pay attention and spend some time doing that. Now, when I'm ready to do a test cut on here, I don't do my test cut. My final cut's going to be with the stock up like this, like you see here. When I do my test cut, I don't do it like that. I take a piece of flat stock and I run flat stock through it because I can hold that in position a lot better. It's a lot more stable. It's easier to push through, and I can get my alignment set up just as well. So here in the next segment, you're going to watch me do that. I'm ready now to do that test cut to see if it fits. Now, I've already done a test cut here. I'm going to do it again so you can see how we do this. But when we get done, what I did is I fed this through like this. And then afterwards, I took the stock here, the rail, put it right there to make sure that I get a flush edge there. That's how I do for my setup. So I'm going to go ahead and do this other edge so you can see how I do that. And I use a push block when I push it through. Of course, my hearing protection and my eye protection. And now we're going to turn on the dust collector and run this through. So you can see the edge that I did here on the MDF, and you can see here my stock, this perfectly flush there. Now, what would it look like if I did it incorrectly? If the positioning of the fence is wrong, one way or the other, what would have happened is this rail would have been a little bit down, or it would have been a little bit above. That's how I would have known if this position was wrong. Now, if the depth was wrong, you won't see any difference. All that does is affect how much got taken of the edge. But you would have known that you had it too deep. How would I have known? The cutter would have created a ridge right in here if you had it set too deep of a cut. And in fact, I can see right here on here just the slightest, very slightest amount of stock that was taken off, which is what I want. I don't want it to be too low, and I don't want it to be too high. So I'm going to come up a little bit closer and see if you can see this on the edge of this. And can you see this little ridge right here? Okay, so if you have it set so that your table is too low, you're taking off too much, this will be really deep in here. That's what would happen. And if you're not seeing any at all, then you've got it set so that you're not taking enough off. So that's how you fine tune it. This right here I think it's really good enough. That's probably not more than it's probably 256th or less of an inch. I mean, it's just the slightest amount. So that's just fine, because you're not going to notice it when you do on the edge of the stock, because it takes the whole entire edge off. So here I'm going to set up for cutting my pieces while on edge. Now I've taken this is a piece of scrap that happens to be the same thickness as my stock that I've used for my frame, so that you can see how we feed this through. Now when we feed it through like this. So I want to have the feather boards now holding this against the fence. So now we use the feather boards when we're going to actually run our stock through. We want to have it set so that the teeth are just in front of the cutter here. Just turn your cutter head so that none of the blades are exposed. You can do that to set this up. And you can put a close-up here on the table if you want to. So you can see now when I have this set up, these are right next to each other, the feather boards, and I've got the teeth right here and here, and I just make sure The cutter's not going to hit those teeth at all, and it's not. All right. Now, don't use your hands when you feed this through here. You're going to have a lot of vibration you feel on that cutter. I like to use this push block so that I can push down. I can be pushing down on the table when I'm feeding this through, and also against the fence at the same time. So let me get on my hearing protection. We'll turn on the dust collector, and you can see me cut that. And you can see here we are. That fits up there, and it's exactly flush. Now I want you to come over here and watch me on the table here. So, of course, here's my final pieces that I cut. And when I fed these through, it doesn't matter what you feed through. You can feed the rails through or the stiles through. It doesn't matter which you feed through first. But when we put this together, see how tight that is? There's no space whatsoever between there and there, and it's perfectly flush. That's what you want to have for your fit. Same thing on this end here. That fits right up there. We've got no space whatsoever. And then, of course, we'll have the same thing over on this side. On that one. Same thing on that one. Now, when we glue this up, we will make sure that this is flush here at this end and flush here at this end. The same thing down here. And, of course, we'll have a panel in the middle when we glue this up, and we'll use clamps to clamp it here and here when we clamp this up. And you'll see me putting that panel on when I get to the section where we're putting in panels. So that's it for this particular one on doing it on the molding head. Now the next segment, we will show you how to do the same thing on the shaper. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.